dad was a soldier. I was born in an army camp in County Kildare, Ireland, and I learned the accordion at school. So I think my music really came from the fact that there was 2 army bands in the choir. I said, oh, I want to be this drummer. I see these guys walk up the street, especially the pipe band, used to swing their sticks, and he'd have a little, like a bracelet thing so he wouldn't drop it on the ground, and they'd bang the drum. You'd hear them playing down the road, and I'd run outside and walk beside them. I always said to the guy, give us a go on your drums. You know, I was quite young, but I think that stayed with me. And then playing the accordion was sort of a way of getting out of school classes. You know, they give you an hour off to do the accordion lesson, but by the age of 12 I realised the accordion wasn't very rock and roll. So the drum kit came into play then, and I started buying single drums because my parents had bought my accordion for me, so I couldn't ask them to buy the drum kit. And a pair of sticks might be handy. I had several endorsement deals. People gave me free drum kits, and once they're free, they're all good. I think my favourite would be a hire kit I use, DW kit. When it came, it was brand new, just came out of the cardboard boxes, set it up, and it was absolutely perfect. But I never actually owned one, just all on hire. If I had a choice to buy a kit, old Ringo Starr, but they're really expensive, you know?
Are they?
Especially a vintage one. In the mid-60s, the Monkees came on television, and Mickey Dolenz was their drummer, and he was also swinging sticks, and I knew then I wanted to be a drummer. So the accordion got binned, and I started to buy drums one at a time, and I copied his setup he had because he was an actor. And if you look at the Monkees TV shows now, they've got one week he's sitting sort of left-handed, next week he's sitting sort of right-handed, facing the camera. So I copied his thing, and I used to move the drums around because I didn't know what it was at the time. So eventually I found out that there was such a thing as a left-handed drummer, and I set up left-handed. But I'm actually a right-handed guy, so I learned the wrong way. So I saved up my meagre earnings, a Premier bass drum, for 20 quid in the shop in Newbridge, and myself and my friend walked home with it because we couldn't get it onto the bus. And on the way home we met the drummer from the pipe band. It was just happened to be walking on the road, and he saw me with the big drum, and he said, where are you going with the big drum? I said, I'm going to be a drummer. He says, you're having a laugh. Because he was a professional drummer, you know, as in a band drummer. He was a great snare player actually. So anyway, I got the needle after that, you know, and I said, well, I'm gonna have to be a drummer, you know. And I set them up in the wrong way. I used to put the tom, which would be here, would be on a chair because I had no stand for it. The snare drum I didn't have at the time. It was actually a cardboard box, and that was on another box. So we'd be bashing along and making it up. And even though I'm naturally a right-handed person, I played drums left-handed for my whole career.
I can hear sticks.
I hear sticks.
You're in luck.
Saturday night, nothing open. Went into the kitchen, got 3 wooden spoons, and done the whole gig with wooden spoons.
Oh, serious?
Yeah, the spoon part, that was in my hand.
Oh, right.
Magic. Nobody noticed.
Nobody noticed?
Nobody noticed, not one person.
Apart from the dinner lady that came running out, where's my spoon?
Well, the chef was coming out and having a look every now and again to see how I was getting on. It wouldn't have been as strong as drumsticks.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
So you finally managed to get yourself a set of drums of your own?
Yeah, it took about 3 years, buying one drum at a time, and then obviously you had to buy the hardware as well. I had a bass drum pedal and a bass drum and a tom-tom. I had no snare, I had one cymbal. So what I used to do with the cymbal was, because I had no stand for it, was to get an old chair, a metal chair with 4 legs on it, turn it upside down, put a drumstick in the bottom of the leg and put the cymbal on the leg. And you know, until I got another stand, and then that became the next one. We moved it around, you know. So it was all stupid stuff like that. And all the time I was learning how to play, you know, listening to records on the record player at the time, Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and bands like that, and just trying to copy it, you know, on my make you up a drum kit.
That's beautiful.
It must have stood you in good stead actually, all those years of just copying tracks, because then that meant that later when you were playing alongside other people, you know, you could do anything.
Yeah, I was a sponge for music. I just absorbed all the music quite easily. You know, I never had any lessons. I was a roadie for a while with a cabaret group when I was a kid, and their drummer was a jazz drummer, but he was right-handed, so I could never play his kit. So I never really got lessons off him, but I watched him all the time. Watched what he was doing and how he was doing it, and I sort of copied that, you know, put that into my own little style, you know, and eventually, after about 3 years, I got all different colour drums together, and I had a couple of cymbal stands and cymbals, and within a year after that, I got my first professional job.
So what kind of age were you when you
I was 17. Now some guys can play drums at 12, but I was a slow starter. Tried to form a little band with some friends of mine. We spent a couple of years doing that. Then I moved to England, got a job playing in a pub band in Birmingham called Midnight. And if you know what Irish show bands are, they're cover bands. The red suit with the dicky bow and 3 platform shoes and flared white trousers. But one thing I think I had from the accordion days is my musicality was quite good. So some drummers can just bash away, but I always had the tune in my head. You know, so by the time I came to 17, I was well able to play lots of types of music like Motown, and I just knew it all. And then I went into show bands, and show bands learn 3 to 4 songs every week, and you were able to copy everything. That wasn't really where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in a rock band, not in a show band, because the show bands are, you got to wear the suit and the dicky bow and conform and smile, you know, and you know what the photographs are like in my book. You see what I used to look like to what I look like when I joined a rock band. But you got to start somewhere.
For so many people in life, wanting to join a rock band is one of their kind of biggest things, whereas for you it almost landed into your being.
It did, yeah. Most of my jobs landed like that. One guy who was in the first show band I was in was actually a rock musician, a rock bass player. He's a fantastic bass player, probably one of the best. Rob Strong is his name, and his son is the singer in the movie The Commitments, Andrew Strong. I was very fortunate to actually join a band that had such a good bass player. Again, without having a lesson, he taught me everything I know about how to play with a bass player. You know, if there was a lesser bass player in the band, I probably wouldn't have learned as quickly. So that was the rock element of the show band. So when the time came to play in an actual rock band, I got a job in a band called Step Aside, quite big in Dublin at the time, 2 residencies with about 300 people at each on Fridays and Sundays. And the drummer left, I was asked to audition, got the job. Bob's your uncle. Off I went into the rock world. That was 1980. That was my first sort of job where I thought, I'm playing original music, I don't have to copy. I did have to copy the drummer who left. I had to copy his style a bit and play the songs, but they were all original songs. I think we had one cover, Great Balls of Fire. I think that was the only song we did as an encore. I thought then, well, this is it, I'm going to be in this band for years, but like everything else, it faded after about 2 years. I just went to work with Johnny Logan, another Irish superstar who had won the Eurovision Song Contest.
Or did he contact you? Or
his brother actually joined Step Aside, and he got us all the job as the backing band for Johnny Logan. We went on tour that lasted a good few years. It wasn't quite where I wanted to be, because again that was playing covers, and I was only in London for about 3 weeks. And I joined a band called Les Enfants, who just happened to be from Dublin and just signed to Chrysalis Records and had moved to London. So this was great for me because I didn't really know the guys. We had just completed a tour with Paul Young and the Royal Family around England, and again, like most juvenile bands, we thought we were going to be the next big thing, but we were anything but. We couldn't sell records, we couldn't give them away. There's so many bands doing the same thing. Another Irish band called 01. It always seemed to be Irish bands, and we had several record deals. I quite enjoyed, you know, just being involved, whether we were successful or not. It was just nice to be there, and drummers just drum. That's all we want to do. We just want to play. The Boomtown Rats and the band I was in, Les Enfants, did the Tube in 1985, and Paul Yates was the presenter. And that was the first day that I met Mr. Geldof up in Newcastle. and Bob came into the changing room to meet our band, because there was 2 Irish bands at the time, just to say hello to the lads, you know. And he doesn't remember this, by the way, but that's where I first met him. When I met him at the rehearsal, he had no clue. He didn't remember that at all, you know.
Was Bob really famous already by this point?
Oh, he was, yeah. Just before Live Aid, February '85, we did that tube together. And I think the Boomtown Rats were just about to finish their career. I think they split in '86. So it was nice to meet him. I also met the bass player that day, Pete. He was there, but he didn't remember that either. I'm the only one that remembers stuff. I'm the longest standing drummer in the solo band. I was never a member of the Rats. The Rats finished in '86. I began with Geldof in 1990. But I knew all the Rats material because I had played them in show bands and stuff. Everybody knew Rat Trap and everybody knew I Don't Like Mondays. I used to be able to do that so easily. I won't do it after a while. And this one won't do it at all. Anyway. The Geldof thing was obviously the biggest gig that I got, you know, which came about by pure chance as well. I lived in London during the 80s, 84 to 89. I played with some bands over here, and then went back to Ireland and got the job with Hazel O'Connor, who was a quite famous singer at the time, and she was resident in Ireland. So I joined her band for a few months, and on one of the gigs she was doing, she supported Bob Geldof at an open air concert not far from where I live, and I just did my set with her. We were on in the afternoon, and I was in the field watching the next band when the bass player from the Boomtown Rats comes up and taps me on the shoulder and he says, "Were you the drummer in the last band?" And I said I was. He said, "Well, our drummer is leaving in 3 weeks' time. Would you like to come to London to audition for the band?" Hazel was playing in London that weekend, so I think the audition was on a Tuesday. Went up to the audition. She said, "What's your name?" I said, "Niall Power." "And I'm not on the list." Lovely. That's what you want to hear. The tour manager came out and he just looked at me as if I had 2 heads, you know, who are you, what are you doing here? And I said, "I met you in Ireland 3 weeks ago. I'm supposed to be doing the audition for Bob today." And he looked at his list, and I'm not on his list either. My memory of it is I just went blank, you know. I said, "Well," he said, "I've come all this way from Ireland to do the audition." And he says, "Well, just hang around," he said, "I'll fit you in at the end." And I think this was about 3 o'clock in the day, and the end for me was like 5:30. So they were auditioning drummers and guitar players. I waited in the cafe and he came back to me about 5:15 and he said, "You're in next," he says. And I met the bass player, the guy from the Boomtown Rats, and he said, "Did you get the tape?" And I said, "No," I said, "I never got the tape." And this is where my show band training came in. He said, "Well, okay, we play the 2 songs and I want you to play them back." So I just did my old bit, took them right in, played the 2 songs, played them perfectly, even though I never heard them before. And with a guitar player, and the guitar player was Ed Dean. He's a great bottleneck blues player. So they asked me to stay on, and another guitar player came in and he did the 2 songs, and both of us got the gig. We were the last people of the day. And the other funny thing about it is I didn't have any sticks with me because my gear had gone back to Ireland with Hazel O'Connor, and also it was a higher drum kit which I had to switch around to the left-handed, you know, so there was all this messing going on before I started to play. But once I started to play, I think they knew.
All those things that had stood you in good stead.
All that stuff from way back, you know, just came into play in one room.
Was Bob in that room?
No, he wasn't there because his daughter was being born that week. He was away for the whole of the rehearsals, but he used to leave it up to the bass player Pete to pick musicians anyway. So they didn't tell me anything on the day. They just said, "Okay, we'll be in touch." And I went down to Houston and I got the train to Holyhead and the boat back to Ireland. that evening. And the next morning I just got in home and the phone went and he says, "You've got the gig. Can you come back to London?" About 3 days later I went back to London and I started rehearsing, and then I rehearsed for a week, and then Geldof came in the second week and I played the set for him. Like, I pretty much knew it, you know, and the only thing he said to me was, you know, "Yeah, that's great," he said, "can you play it faster?" Or in his own words, "Can you play it fucking faster?" And that was it, and we were off on tour, and the first gig was in Hamburg a few days later, and that job lasted for 25 years.
Brilliant.
Wow.
So I must have been doing something right. And the first gig was in Hamburg, on tour for 6 weeks all around Europe, and he was having a hit at the time with a song called The Great Song of Indifference, which was in the charts everywhere. So we played to full houses everywhere, and I was just amazed by the whole thing, because this was the ultimate for me. I only had one bad weekend with him. It was the first weekend where he was just laying down the rules, and I learned the rules, and we never had a bad word ever since. It was probably the best gig, and certainly the most prestigious gig I've been involved with. I learned a lot from him. It's sort of an organic band, you know, everybody was allowed to do their own thing. You know, you weren't sort of regimented into playing the way he wanted you to play. You know, you were allowed to express yourself, and that was great for me. Probably one of the first bands I was in that I was allowed to do that. You know, every night then you're expressing yourself as best you can, and you're trying to do your best, and so were the other guys in the band. So I love that, you know, that was a real achievement for me, you know, to get that far and not have somebody telling you what to do or how to play. And we toured all over the world. I was never a flash drummer who did big drum solos or anything like that. All I ever did was play in a band, and it was the best thing for me was to play with 4 or 5 other musicians, listen to them, and they're working off me, I'm working off them, and that was what I was best at. You know, I was never going to be Jeff McCarroll or Steve Gadd or any of these guys, some of the best drummers in the world. I met him actually in Germany a few years back before he passed away, and he was such a lovely guy. Like, it was just, for me, I was going, oh God, I'm going to meet Jeff McCarroll. But it wasn't anything like that, you know, it's just 2 drummers having a chat. After my Parkinson's diagnosis, I was doing a gig in Finland with Bob, and I had Dave Weckl, who's a fantastic drummer, jazz drummer from America, and he watched my gig from the side of the stage, and afterwards he came to the caravan. We always change in caravans on festivals, and I hadn't the heart to say hello to him because I felt so bad after my performance, you know, where I felt really under pressure with Parkinson's.
I don't suppose any of that lot have done a session with wooden spoons.
Well, no, probably not, but you never know.
What gig was that for?
That was a wedding in a hotel, and I left more than the wooden spoons behind. I came with no sticks, no snare stand, half the hi-hat, and it was a Saturday night. And funny enough, the first spoon broke in about the 3rd song, but the other 2 lasted the whole night.
Excellent.
And nobody knew.
So you said to the chef, this is a much better brand than this one.
Yeah.
You have also managed to be a husband and a father throughout your entire rock and roll career, which
Correct.
is pretty impressive.
Yeah. We met in a band. She was a backing vocalist, I was the drummer for only a short-lived band, one of the show bands. We just hit it off, and she didn't continue her career as a singer. We lived in Hackney for a while in the 80s, and then we moved back to Ireland. In 89, our son was born in 91. 92, sorry, he was born in 92. We also have a daughter, Slaney, who has now gone into the entertainment world, singing and acting. And
She's a rising star, that girl.
I hope so. I hope so.
I know so.
Unfortunately, Polly Yates passed away in the year 2000. And I was on the way home from one of the gigs and with Geldof, and I met Louis Walsh in the Heathrow Airport. and he said, would you like to play with Westlife? And I thought, well, when is it, you know? And he said, oh, in about 6 months' time. So because Paula had passed, Bob wasn't working. So I did the Westlife World Tour in 2001, and that was quite amazing. It was like, you know, screaming. Everybody was screaming, so different, you know. After about 3 weeks, I didn't like it. You know, we did 11 nights in Wembley as well. Everything was sold out, incredible really. One thing about it, it was never like being in a band. It was just, you're a cog in the system, and you're 5 musicians, 5 dancers and 5 Westlife guys playing all this music to people who are not really listening to the music. They just want to see the act. They want to see the 5 guys on stage. And for me, the best part of it was probably the rehearsals, because again, I was good at that. I was learning how to play the tunes, and also had to play with a click track, you know, because lots of these songs were linked to videos on the big screens. Yeah. And you had to play with a headset all the time. Whereas in the Geldof band, we don't use any of that. We just play naturally, and you can listen to the other musicians and play the song as you feel it. And if there's a mistake, that's okay. If the solo goes on much longer, that's okay as well. But in Westlife, it had to be rehearsed, you know, the fine details of the whole thing to the video. And they had video screens that closed in front of me, so I actually couldn't see out. You could see left and right. You'd never see the audience. 15,000 people are screaming out there. It's like a big circus really that moves around the world. I think the biggest crowd we played to was in South Africa, in Cape Town. 22,000 people came to see Westlife.
Wow.
Quite amazing. On one night, I remember walking through the audience. The audience had just left, and I got off stage, changed my clothes, walked out the front through everybody, and nobody knew that there was a drummer who had just been on stage, because they couldn't see anybody. You could only see Westlife. They came to us and recorded Top of the Pops at a live gig, so we had to go in at 9 o'clock the next morning after the gig. That was Westlife. They were #1 with Uptown Girl, the Billy Joel song. Set up the whole thing, and they filmed us. What was that called?
Comic Relief.
Comic Relief. I appeared on Top of the Pops with Westlife. So that's the only time I was ever on Top of the Pops, and then we were #1. It was okay, I got paid. Yeah, they fired me at the end. But I went straight back to Geldof in 2002. We just took off where we left off. It was a great job, you know. Obviously, probably the highlight of my career was playing with Mr. Geldof. That was the best band. It was just an amazing run, you know, and I never thought it was going to happen. You know, it was my thing, you know. So a lot of the things that happened to me in my career, like being in the right place at the right time. In the Geldof band, we did a lot of chat shows. We did Graham Norton, we did Michael Parkinson. You know, all over the world we did these shows, and I'd say 90% of them we mimed. There might be a live vocal, but the drums would never be played. You know, Bob was always meeting world leaders and doing all these things, you know. From time to time he'd bring the band with. So he brought us to meet Nelson Mandela. We were sitting in the waiting room, all the guys in the band, and Johnny, the guitar player, Johnny Turnbull, was playing on a ukulele melodies, you know, and we were just sitting patiently waiting for Nelson to come out. And I'm not joking, when he walked into the room, it was like a religious experience, you know, just being in the room with that guy. He just had an aura of, I don't know what it was, but it just felt different. And you can see me being introduced by Bob, you know, and here's another Irishman. There's some of the highlights, you know. He had an album called Sex, Age and Death, which was obviously dealing with Paula. I think up to that time we were a fun band. If you look back at some of the old videos, you know, we had a fiddle and an accordion, and we were a good happy band, and then we weren't a happy band. We went into another section of our career, and but that's all recovered now. Another album at the time called How to Compose Popular Songs That Will Sell.
Drummers can often be the ones that get a lot of flack in a band.
Yeah, we do. We do. That's okay, you know. We just hang around with the musicians. It was like driving a bus. You know, I had a load of passengers. The passengers were the audience. And I'm driving the bus, and I know where I'm going. And that was the best thing ever, you know, just to be in that hot seat every night, you know, and expressing yourself, you know. It's probably one of the things I miss now the most, is not being able to express myself in that way, you know, because music is so in here for me. I've lost that little thing. I love listening to music, but I much more enjoyed playing music and making the beat and seeing the front row all going like this. And that's my foot, making that happen. So that's what I really enjoyed. And some nights, you know, you just look out and you think, oh, it's great to be up here. Drummers are in the back, obviously, and we don't get the limelight, and the guitar players are giving it loads.
Did you feel left out at times?
I did not feel left out, because actually the drummer in any band is controlling the whole thing.
Yes.
Believe it or not, that's what happens in music. If the drummer's no good, the band is no good, and lots of people will tell you that. So when you know it's working and you're doing your best to make it work, it's the most fantastic feeling, you know. And everybody will come into the dressing room afterwards and say, "That was so good," you know, and you go, "Good day's work." Very bizarre gig with Geldof in Libya, in Benghazi. We weren't really told what the gig was before we went. To us musicians, sometimes you don't get told, you just end up going to the gig and playing the gig. So this just happened to be a political rally with Colonel Gaddafi's son, and he was there to make a big speech, and we're sort of in the backstage waiting to play, and it's live TV of the African nations. He finishes his speech and we go on, and we lasted 2 songs. And there was a big riot in the audience, and they started throwing chairs up on stage. And I got hit with a slipper in the head, and it bounced off my head and it knocked a stick out of my hand. We had to leave. You know, the whole thing was abandoned. And that was very, very scary. And at one stage, there's about, on my video, which I have of the gig, or the lack of the gig, there's about 100 soldiers on stage with submachine guns right in front of the band. And that was scary, because we didn't have any security, you know.
Gosh,
and
when was that?
2007, I think.
You performed at Live Aid, which
Yeah.
is something that not everyone can sit there and say.
That was great.
How did it feel? Can you remember the atmosphere backstage
Yeah.
and all of that?
I'll never forget it. I brought my son with me over from Ireland, and we went into the backstage. We went in quite early. You know, I think the show started at midday, and I was there about half past 10, and we were all hanging out, and it was just an array of musicians in one place. Quite astounding, you know. Dave Gilmour and Pete Townsend and Sting. And I spent the whole day wondering if we were going to play, because it wasn't 100% that we were going to play that day, even though all the members of the band were there. We weren't scheduled on the bill, and we didn't do a sound check. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Bob gathered everybody together, and we went up to the side of the stage, and he was having words with Harvey Goldsmith, who was the promoter that day. I don't know what was said, but anyway, the next thing we know is we're going on stage with no sound check. I never saw the drum kit until I walked on to the stage, and there's the drum kit right beside us, and it's set to my height. But as any drummer will tell you, everybody has them at different angles. The depth of the stool could be very close to the ground, or it could be very high. So I walked on a very tiny drum kit, which had belonged to the previous band, who were called Travis. And we played I Don't Like Mondays. I couldn't hear anything. The drum kit was set up right-handed. I had no microphone to sing, and we just did it, and it was the most amazing 4 minutes ever. The millions watching on TV, and a couple of 100,000 people in Hyde Park, you know, never would have dreamed. And looking up towards Marble Arch, and all you could see were heads of people, forever. And we did the song, and in the middle of the song, I Don't Like Mondays, there's a pause where Bob puts his hand up, and during that I picked up my camera and I took a photograph. I was so nervous, so I just stood up and went one click. You see all these people in the distance. That was good. It was good to play. It was good to be there and play, but the best thing about the day was meeting Paul McCartney, for me. The little story about that is my son was standing beside me eating an ice cream at the time. I saw Paul McCartney coming down after doing his little bit on stage, and I brought the CD cover of the White Album. I had it in my pocket with a pen, just in case. And I ran over to where he was and I said, Paul, would you mind signing this for me? My son was supposed to take the picture of me getting the autograph with Paul, but he just ate the ice cream. I got my autograph and I forgot to even tell him my name, to get name on the thing. So it just has Paul McCartney.
Was he even really looking, or was he
Who,
just...
my son?
Yeah.
No, he was just gone. He was only 12 at the time, he didn't realise. So that was, the timing was all wrong that day. It's probably the biggest audience I've ever played to, even though it was only for 4 minutes. My dad had just passed away a couple of months previous. The fact that he could have possibly seen that, it would have been a big moment, you know, because my dad was a soldier and he didn't really understand that you could make a living out of playing the drums.
Yeah.
He would sooner I become a soldier, but he never pushed me to get a real job, as they call it. And it would have been nice, but unfortunately it didn't happen. But
was your mother there?
No, she was at home watching it. I remember watching Pink Floyd that evening, it was just amazing.
Speaking of meeting our heroes, there's one pretty phenomenal hero that you came to know. Yeah. Let us know about that one.
Another fluke in my career. This is my life. This a book I never thought I would write, obviously, because I just wanted to be a drummer. Some funny things in here. As musicians will tell you, we don't work all the time. If the phone rings and it's a gig, you take the gig. A friend of mine phoned from Scotland and he said, there's a band coming into Ireland to rehearse. Are you free to drive them? I thought, this is great. He gave me the dates and I said, I'm working with Bob, but I'm free for the 3 weeks. He said, all you got to do is go up to Larne in Northern Ireland and there's a van coming over from Scotland, people carrier. Drive down to Dublin Airport, pick up these bands coming in from America and take them to the hotel. So I did that. 4 guys. I had somebody's name, like they do at the airports. You've got the Mr. So-and-so. And in fact, this guy's name was Eric Schimmerhorn. So I don't know him. 4 guys came out and I didn't know any of them, hadn't a clue. The briefs that I had from the management company was not to talk to anybody, just be the van driver, which is quite normal for musicians, they don't want to get into the van and have the van driver, how's it going lads, One of them said, yeah, come back tomorrow morning at 10 AM and take us to the rehearsal studio. Came back in the next morning, 4 guys came out, got into the van and I took them about 10 minutes drive away down to the rehearsal studio. They said, go back to the hotel, there'll be somebody else there to be brought down later. I went back to the hotel and the tour manager, he came out and he said, just wait a couple of minutes, we're going to be going down to the rehearsal again. He went back into the hotel and he walked out with David Bowie. And they got into the back of the van and I'm like, it's a great day, And I brought him down to the rehearsal studio. I sat there all day outside and in the evening they came out and I brought them back to the hotel and that was my job for 3 weeks. Just every day doing the same thing. On one occasion he came out on his own, David, and got into the van and he's in the back of the van and he spoke to me about stuff that was going on in Dublin. There was a big sort of drug issue at the time and he was obviously reading the papers and one of the things he asked me was did I know where I could buy a saxophone. So there was one song that they had a saxophone, so I brought him down to the rehearsal, put him in, and I went off and I bought a saxophone in the shop just for him. And when I came in with the saxophone, the other guys in the band came out and they said, do you know where you get a cappuccino machine? So I had to go and buy a cappuccino machine and bring it back to them because they didn't like the coffee in the rehearsal room. During the 3 weeks they did 2 gigs in 2 pubs. On the last Friday it was in the Bagged Inn, which is a very famous, a bit like the Dingwalls over here. They sound checked in the afternoon and in the night time I brought them to the gig and there was a laneway beside the gig where I put the van in and I faced the van facing outwards, to get a swift getaway because there was hundreds of people all over the place who had just heard that David Bowie was going to be playing in this little pub on a Friday night. So it was their sort of warm-up gig, that's what they were doing. I was down the laneway and they came out after the gig and got into the van, and they had Ronnie Wood with them and several other people I know. The van was full of people, all of a sudden, hold about 15 or 20 people. And I tried to drive out the laneway, but somebody had put a car up the top of the laneway, and there was only minimal space to get out with this big bus. So it took me a few minutes, and somebody took a photograph. You can see the flash, and David Bowie sitting behind me having a cigarette. They were all smokers in the van. Look at my face. And behind him you see Ronnie Wood's eyes. And I brought him back to the hotel and went home. And about 2 days later, I found a video cassette under the seat, a VHS video cassette, which is the whole evening's event. Somebody had taken it off somebody who shouldn't have been filming, left it in the van. I think it's probably the tour manager. And it shows me driving David Bowie. And I've got this face on me which is like panic, you know. So there's a policeman standing in front of the van and he's going like this. What have I crashed now?
Terrified.
Yeah. Someone took a video.
I'm a drummer.
I'm a drummer, yeah. Fun days. We went to Ronnie Wood's house and we had a recording session in his house. And the next day there was another gig in Dublin and then they were gone. So about 3 weeks later I'm doing a gig in Paris with Bob Geldof, and Tin Machine and David Bowie are on this gig. And we're just standing backstage waiting to go on, and David Bowie walks up to Bob to say hello, and I'm standing beside Bob, and he says, "You're the van driver from Dublin." He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm Bob's drummer." He said, "You should have told me that when we were in Dublin. You could have jammed with us in the rehearsal studio." So my timing was off for that gig, but he was a gentleman, a lovely man. I'm so glad I met him.
So you started to realise that your body just simply wasn't functioning kind of how you understood it to.
Yeah, well, you know, being a drummer, like you're working at a very high rate and you're playing everything fast, and lots of things I did in my career is I never really looked where I was playing the drums. You know, I'd just put my hand out and I would hit the drum or hit the cymbal. And around 2006, I think, I began to miss things, you know. Especially the bell of the cymbal. So you're playing like this and then your arms extended and you're hitting the bell, but the microphone is here, so you're not looking at what you're doing. I went to hit the bell and I missed, and then it happened again, and then I realised that my foot was not having the same pressure on the pedal, my left foot. Banging the pedal, the first time it was quite hard, and the second beat would be quite soft. And just move around and try to, what is this, you know? Like it happened once and then it didn't happen for 3 weeks. And then it happened again. And this went on for more than a year, I'd say a year and a half, in a very small way. And I had no idea what it was. It just bothered me. One night I was playing with another band back in Ireland, and my arm just dropped to the floor, the stick went on the ground like that. And I played on with the right side to the end of the song, and my arm was pretty much just flopped down by my side. We took a little break and I came back after say 5 or 10 minutes and I played the rest of the night, no problem.
Really?
But it freaked me out totally, that event, because this was a major failure of the left side, you know. Just such a random thing, you know, but it was a big random thing. And the next day I went back to my doctor, who wasn't there that day. It was a stand-in GP. Thought that maybe something was, you know, repetitive strain, you know, in the bone or something from years and years of hitting drums. So I went to the doctor, my own GP this was, and he thought I was after damaging the bone in my hip, and he gave me some medicine, you know, which didn't have any effect at all. He said, "Well, I think I'll send you for an MRI scan and send you down to the neurologist." I went for the MRI scan and the MRI scan was clear, so there was no hint of a stroke or anything like that. He couldn't trigger, he couldn't see what was wrong with me, because I mean I couldn't put the drum kit in his surgery and say this is what's happening, you know. I couldn't show a symptom. Tap your hands and do little things, and I was able to do everything. So he said, come back in 3 months' time. And I went back in 3 months and I told him the same thing is happening, like once every 2 weeks, sometimes once a week. And he did all these little tests on me again, and still couldn't find anything. So he said, give it another 3 months. So I went back on the third time, and he asked me to do this little trick here, where you're doing this with your hand. And if you notice my left hand, I can barely do it. But at the time, I was able to do it in both hands. But then he asked me to count backwards in threes from 100. So I was going 97, 94, and my legs started to shake. Because what he did was he actually activated my brain more so than a normal sort of day. You know, when I was playing drums, I was very active in my brain, which is when the Parkinson's started to show. So he got me going, and I sort of went like this, and he said, stop. He said, you've got Parkinson's disease. Just like that, he just blurted out. And of course, me being a drummer, never thought about any disease ever, you know. I was 50 at the time, and for such a small symptom, I wasn't expecting, you know, a lifetime sentence, which is what it turned out to be. It was just one of those things, like I'll never forget that moment, except I didn't know the consequences. And he said, have a look at the internet and learn about this disease you've got. And
it's almost like you've finally been given an answer, so there's
yeah.
relief, but at the same time you're thinking, I don't know what you've just told me.
Yeah, I don't know, and they don't really give you the information. It's not like they give you a leaflet and say, go home and read this.
They just tell you to go and Google it.
I drove back to Dublin after the diagnosis, and I remember listening to the radio, but I don't remember the journey, because you get into a sort of a place, you know, not a place I've ever been before. And I went down the hill, like, you know, for about 6 months. I just felt absolutely awful, and the whole manifestation of Parkinson's came into me, you know. Started to look at the internet and saw all these very sick people, and I couldn't see myself as being one of them at that time. So I spent 6 months not wanting to play the drums, not wanting to go to gig. I became very tired, and said, look, I've got some gigs coming up with Bob Geldof, and I'm going to have to play very fast on these gigs. Can you give me some medicine? So he gave me some dopamine medicine, which is Parkinson's medicine. And I gradually got a little bit better, and I got myself a different bass drum pedal. I had 2 pedals now, one for the right leg and one for the left leg. And I began to play better again, and I began to feel better. But obviously Parkinson's it deteriorates all the time, and I slipped away over years. You know, I got about 4 years after diagnosis when I could be confident to drum. But then, you know, it sort of got worse, and my speed began to go, and I couldn't keep the tempos going, and I began to perspire a lot on stage, and it just felt very uncomfortable, you know. Well, I still felt okay when I didn't drum. That's the main thing, you know. I was just putting out so much information as a drummer that it activated the Parkinson's each time, you know. The Parkinson's from being here, suddenly it was this big. I was in total control, and suddenly the control was gone. I didn't know what to do, you know. I just couldn't keep the pace of Bob's music. I began to get myself fit. I started going to the gym and swim and do loads, and I think that's been my saviour for the moment. It's now 11 years, and even though I can't really drum anymore, I still feel good, like I'm fighting back. When I first got ill, I actually got a double bass drum pedal, and the other pedal was over here because I'm left-handed, you know, so the other pedal was over here. So I was able to switch from use my right leg, close this, just close it tight. And the pedal was here for the bass drum. I just put the bass drum on my right leg, and when this one got tired, I switched over and back and over and back. And that was quite easy to do for a couple of years, but then once you lose the speed, you lose the grip as well.
Oh really?
Yeah, so the stick just goes like that through your hand, and you end up with it the wrong way around.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very, as you can imagine, very frustrating. But it pisses me off to knowing that I can't do it anymore.
Are the doctors surprised as well at your sort of maintenance, if you like?
They never tell you.
Don't they?
No, they never tell you. They just, my neurologist, all he says is keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
That's the only medicine I get off him. Even though I take the medicine, I'm still on the same medicine that I took 11 years ago. The same quantity. I've never upped my quantity. Some days I have good days where I don't have any symptoms, and then other days I'll be shaking all day, you know. And you just got to get through that and think that tomorrow will be better. When I'm having a bad day, I can go and have a lie down and make it go away. And maybe in an hour's time it'll be back. But anyway, the hour in between is sort of free time when I feel a bit normal. Like now, you know, I'm not really shaking now. I have stuff, I can still feel it's all in my left side, but this is quite mild. Some days it's actually going like that, which is it tires you out, you know, it makes you very fatigued. In a funny way, I'm enjoying the challenge of fighting this bloody thing that I've got, you know. It doesn't rule me. I want to rule it, you know, and keep it in its place. And so far so good, I've been able to do that. Apparently when it kills all the nerve cells on the left side, it moves to the right. I'm 11 years with it now, and it hasn't moved yet, so I must be doing okay. My exercise routine is the most important thing I do. I don't rely on the medicine, I rely on the feel-good factor of what I get from, you know, exercising every day and keeping the rest of the body in good shape. Your
mindset is in the right place too, because you're so determined.
Yeah, well, I like the fight. You know, Parkinson's not the worst thing out there. It's probably the biggest fight I've ever had, you know, apart from the fight with Geldof. My own thing was always performance. Not a great studio drummer, but I was a really good live drummer in the context of a band and playing with guys who were also hitting off what I was doing.
Totally.
And once that went, then any other type of drumming was sort of, don't really want to do it, you know. I have a kit at home which I never set up anymore. It's up in the attic and it's there just in case they find a cure.
Yeah.
And someday maybe they will. It's even loud for me. And even though it bothers me every day, something goes wrong every day and I can't change a light bulb because I can't hold one and twist the other. I can't put a letter into an envelope because it just shakes. Every day something like that happens, but as an overall thing I think I'm doing okay with it. So that's the story with drums. It's a real shame for something like this to happen to a drummer. I wouldn't say I'm enjoying the challenge, but at least I'm at it. I'm still doing it, you know. Another one for excesses on the road. That's probably stood to me over time. You know, I never smoked. I never did any drugs, which is sort of weird, you know. I'm associated with musicians and being on the road and there's drugs everywhere and there's stuff going on. I just didn't have that thing that allowed me to drift into that, you know. Can't bear the smell of ordinary smoke, never mind any other smoke. Or taking pills. I wouldn't even take an aspirin, you know. And now I'm forced to take these bloody dopamine tablets every day, but I don't rely on them. I rely on my body to do as much as it can for itself. Lots of drummers do tricks with their sticks. Now just even to try and hold the stick is difficult. Obviously I try not to do stuff like this anymore
Really annoying.
Well, it pisses me off, really. I would advise anybody not to look at the internet for diseases. Just try and, maybe find a place that makes you feel good and what's taken you to that place. In my case, I went back to my youth and I remembered all my friends from the Curragh, where I grew up in the army camp. I went back to visit the Curragh, which is about 30 miles or so from where I live. I went up there one day and I actually went back to the hospital where I was born, which is, I don't know what brought me back there. It's actually not there anymore. There's only the outline of it. The foundation thing is there. And I cried for about half an hour, just standing there.
Release.
It's a weird thing to do, and I remembered all my friends and all how we used to play around, and that made me happy. It made me sad, like to be there and to be ill, but it also made me happy, and I think that was the start of the recovery process. So I would love to beat this thing. I'd love to be the first guy to beat it on my own terms, because I don't want to go down the road of having to have brain surgery and all that. It's going to be. I don't want to lose myself. It's hard to deal with any diagnosis. I was playing with my friend's band, who I played with quite regularly. We were doing a wedding one night. I didn't want to go to the gigs because I didn't know how I was going to play. During one song, I think it was a Metallica song, we were playing Metallica at the wedding, and I started to play well again. And they heard it. The other three guys in the band just turned around and they said, "You're back." But they heard it in my playing. That was about 6 months after the diagnosis. From that day onwards, I actually started to recover. And I think I may have had a form of depression after being told I had Parkinson's. Because you just go down into a hole and it's not a place you've ever been before. So to try and bring yourself back out of that is quite difficult. And I'm not sure how I did it or why it happened on one particular night, but it did happen. And if I could put that and bottle that and sell that to other people, I never had depression. I was never stressed. I was just this guy just floating along, loving being in the band. And then all of a sudden, there's a new set of rules for everything. And I managed to come to grips with that. But I don't know why that happened. But anyway, it did happen. And I still feel good about it. I'm certainly not depressed. I do have bad days like anybody else with anything sort of that you can't deal with going on, any disease. But I'm still happy and still smiling.
You certainly are.
This took a year. I did some genealogy on my family. I had no intentions of writing a book, but I decided to add my music story to the genealogy story, and then realised that I did have enough, just about drummer's size book. One of the best things about, I suppose, writing your own story is the fact that you got so many friends. You make so many friends on the way. It's not a lonely life being in the band, wanting to be on the road and doing all this stuff with the lads and having a few beers in the bar and arriving in an airport, getting into a bus, going to the gig. Every band does the same thing. We all do it, and you have to love that lifestyle. So when I wrote it in the book, I was thinking, well, I can't include all this nonsense that might have went on in the road. So I just tell the nice bits.
What goes on tour stays on tour.
What goes on tour stays on tour.
Looking back on your life, for you, it brings you a lot of joy.
Yeah, but I never look back when you're actually doing the gig. You never look back. It was only when it ended that I decided to look back. And I realised then that all these amazing things happened. I had a great time being a drummer, it was what I wanted to do all the time, and I played in, I think, 140 bands. I think every step of the way it led to a better gig. You just got to bide your time, and there's many a day I was in a nightclub or something and someone just said, "Have you heard this drummer's leaving?" The right place, right time. A lot of my jobs happened that way. Timing is everything, yeah. Well, I never expected to write a book. I mean, it wasn't part of my thing. And even today, I would just love to be a drummer, not an author. Marianne Faithfull, Roger Whittaker. He used to whistle back in the 60s. Before my time, he had the hits. Mr. Geldof for 25 years. You just do it when you're a working drummer. That's what you do. You work the circuit. The only thing I ever wanted to do was to be in like a rock band and the four guys, like similar to U2, not U2 in particular, but similar band where the four guys get together, they write their own songs, they become successful and they stay together. That's what I wanted to do. That was my dream. None of that worked out for me. I just became a session drummer, playing with all different types of bands, different type of music. If I could turn the clock back to the early days, myself and my 4 school friends, and if we were successful, that would have been brilliant. It's good to have a career anyway within the music business. You just get the phone call and most of the phone calls are, do you want to do this? And you just go and do it. But we've done some very small gigs, you know, in our time. And sometimes the small gigs are better because the band is bonding together. We're all playing well and we just happen to have a good night. Some nights we do the same gig and we don't get the same reaction. And I think that's for every band, you know. You don't know what makes it work, but when it does work, it's fantastic. I was made to be a drummer. That was my sponge technique, as I call it. I copied everybody. I play drums from the heart. I love being in the band. I always wanted to be in the band. He was a great guy to work for. I love being in that band, and you know, he was really, really good to me. You know, that friendship has been, you know, put together over 25 years. I had all these photographs and videos that I'd taken over the years, and enough material certainly for a story. Not a story I ever thought I was going to write. I would just sooner be a drummer. But anyway, here it is. Timing is everything, by yours truly. Not to give up. Fight back as best you can and do something for yourself that makes you feel good. I never went to the gym ever until I got diagnosed with Parkinson's. I was always a good swimmer, so I went back to the water and I sort of reinvented my youth in my 50s. And it's not for everybody. I do it religiously every day. I do about 10k in the morning. I swim about 30 lengths. It makes
every day, the swimming and the running?
Day. Yeah, 7 days a week. And that's the best thing I've ever done because there's no medicine involved in that. It's just, again, it's a feel-good factor. So I urge people who have Parkinson's or any sort of disability like that to do something for yourself. Neurology won't help you. The pills will only help you a little bit. And if you do something for yourself that doesn't involve any other person, you will feel much better, you know. I don't rely on anybody else to show me what to do. I just get out and do it. The feel-good factor from doing something for yourself. You know, I've lost the ability to play, but I think everything is still in my head. And
your symptoms went when you went to Australia?
Yeah, they didn't go away completely, but they lessened. Some days I felt I didn't have it.
Wow, that must have been such a great feeling.
And the sunshine was amazing. I cycled 1,200 kilometres, quite an amazing trip, you know, just to be able to do that after 11 years of Parkinson's. I also had a lack of vitamin D. I think everybody in England and Ireland have. Even though my symptoms came back when I came back, while I was there, they were so minimal that it was just easy to get around, you know. I might have to go back.
I'd say so.
2015, I decided to call it a day on stage. It was hard for everybody to be in the one place again, you know, because if you have a sort of swan song do, it usually happens on a gig. So my last gig with the band was in Poland. I think my final drumming gig was in Naples. A good friend of mine, Jim Russell, had taken over on drums. And then I did one more gig to see if I could do it. I knew then that my speed had gone. You know, and once the speed goes, then, you know, it was like someone else playing drums in my body. And it's not the way I wanted to do it. So I went to the percussion for a while. I knew on the percussion that I was standing up and people in the audience were beginning to look at me shaking, you know, and I thought, the attention is not on Bob, it's over here with me, you know. Why is this guy shaking? He's holding onto stuff. So I didn't like that. And I thought, I gotta stop this. So my last official gig was in Poland. Everything became a bit difficult, you know, because you get a lot of fatigue with Parkinson's. If you're a drummer, you gotta fire on all cylinders, and my cylinders weren't firing, only some of them. We just said goodbye, you know, there was no sort of big check or anything like that.
It was just the normal day.
Or flowers, you know, bands don't do that, you know. And we just hugged each other and that was it, I was gone, you know. And the worst thing about that is when you go home and the phone doesn't ring anymore. Or there's no emails coming to say the next gig is that. you're not on the next gig, you know, so that was a bit difficult. But so anyway, behind my back they decided to have a retirement evening for me in Dublin. The Boomtown Rats had by this stage got back together, and they were playing in the Olympia Theatre in Dublin, and my family were in on this as well. I was the only one that didn't know anything. I knew everything about the road. Anyway, they were able to organise it behind my back, and I only felt something afterwards when I noticed everybody was hanging around the bar in the venue. They had a balcony, and I was sitting in the balcony like the guy from the Muppet Show, you know, looking down at everybody else. And then tour manager Willow, he came up and he brought me down to the bar, and I thought, maybe a lot of people I know here, maybe there's something going to happen here. And then nothing happened. It was just an after show, general drink up. And then we got taxis back to the hotel, the Gresham Hotel on O'Connell Street. And Willow said to me, he said, we'll get the last taxi, let the band go first. We walked into the hotel, walked into the bar, and the bar is full of everybody I've ever known in the music business, all sitting in there at 12 o'clock at night, maybe later than 12. And it was such a great thing, and I hadn't a clue. So Bob came in and he made a very, very nice speech about our time together on the road, and presented me with 2 silver drumsticks which were engraved Dun Drumming for my 25 years of service. And we hugged, and that was my retirement evening, which you were at as well.
I was.
And I was quite chuffed, you know, and I'm not a great person for parties, especially surprise parties, but I'm really glad that happened. So it was great, and thank you, Bob. Never got to say it on the night, but thank you very much. It doesn't feel like my arm on the drums anymore, you know, and there's no fun in that for me. So I think it was a great 40 years. I ain't complaining. So thank you very much, Mr. Geldof. Phone rings and it's a gig of any description, you just go and do it. That was my whole life, was just to answer the phone. Where do you want me to be? What time do you want me to be there at? And what do I need to wear?